Hey everybody, welcome to Behind the Scenes, the podcast for Out of Frame. I'm your host, Sean Malone. You may have noticed that we are not in the studio this week. We actually had a power outage when we were scheduled to record this episode, so we decided we would experiment with something. So I am joined, as you can see, not only by Paul Nelson, but also back again with Jennifer Maffasanti. I was going to say back in the studio, but once again, not here. So this is a little bit of an experiment for us. We always knew that we were going to have to do a all remote sort of version of recording of the show. Not only because, like over different holiday breaks or other kinds of things like that, we just figured that was kind of inevitable. So we built, we made a plan for it, but we've never actually done it. And now with Jen ultimately moving across the country in the near future, it seemed like a good time to test. And like I said, our power was out. So here we are. How are you guys doing? Jen, Paul, how's it going?
Well, we are recording this November 4th, Wednesday. So you guys can do the math on, so it's been a late night. But the sun rose, contrary to what everybody was thinking. But I'm always a optimistic person. I'm a very optimistic person. So I think the future is bright. We live in the best time ever to be alive. Always remember that, no matter what. It's great.
That is very optimistic indeed, especially given how uncertain everything remains at this state.
Facts. And other than like the stress of the election and the stress of trying to move a family all the way across the country, things are going great. Exciting times.
So Jen, for those who missed Paul and I talking about it last week or, hadn't heard about it, like Jen actually was in Utah the last time we recorded episodes of this show. So she was like sort of getting set up in her new gig. How'd that go?
It went really well. Utah is a beautiful state. I highly recommend visiting it. Just gorgeous mountains, blue skies, just so pretty. And the new work is outstanding. I am really enjoying all of my new coworkers and the sorts of projects that we're working on. And it is still, perpetuating individual liberty, just in a different location. So no complaints at this point. So it's all going really, really well. And right now I am back at my house in Atlanta, working remotely on some solo projects that I have. I say solo projects. These are definitely work projects for the new job, but they do not necessarily involve other people at the office. So lots of editing, lots of writing, all that good stuff. So I can do that remotely with no trouble at all. And that is what I'm doing until I'm actually out in Utah full time.
Nice. I actually just had a conversation with Connor Boyack, who's your new boss, I guess, last night, because he had posted something about the Tuttle twins and about I think he posted a testimonial from somebody who said that they never voted, they never were interested in any of these ideas, they were never really engaged at all in the kind of philosophical ideas that we talk about a lot. Until they read the books that they had bought for their kids, which is Connor's for those who aren't aware, Connor's a children's book author also. And anyway, it was funny. It just started a conversation for me because I'd spent so much of my life being told by think tank people, prior to starting at FEE and being able to build what we've built here. But like I'd spent so much time sort of being dismissed as like, oh, why would you talk about pop culture? Why would you talk about, these sort of frivolous things, right? Like, why would you have those kinds of conversations? And and the reality is because I want to, it's enjoyable. It's more fun to talk about that. And it's more fun to talk about what we're going to talk about today on this show than talking about the election, which we would have to do otherwise, which I'm pretty excited not to have that be the primary theme of the show. But, also because other people want to talk about it too. And because it's part of the cultural conversation that I think we should be having. And it's just, anyway, Connor and I had a really good talk last night about that, sort of late, like midnight or 1 or something. Well, my time anyway. Connor's in Utah, so much earlier for him.
It's wild right now.
Yeah, I'm sure. Apart from election madness, are you guys watching anything? I've just been sort of catching up on old stuff. Like I caught up. I'm now fully caught up on Rick and Morty. Been watching the most recent season. I think the most recent season of Forged in Fire, which is a blacksmithing show. Just kind of like making the rounds on things that I hadn't watched in a while, but nothing too amazing. We will, by the way, we're recording this after the first episode of The Mandalorian came out, but next week on this show, we will actually be talking about The Mandalorian. So I want to save any of that conversation. But Paul, what's been going on in your world?
Well, we're getting our siding redone as we speak, so it might be a little loud. Hopefully you guys don't pick up on the noises coming from the outside. But it's been pretty busy time. We are ramping up to Entrepreneur Week here in a couple weeks that Fee is putting together. And if you haven't checked that out, it is 4 days of awesome talks, awesome guest panels, Q&A, and it's all for free. And so if you want to join, go check out the website. I'm sure we can put that in the link in the description, but it's free. And go register, tell your friends, because it's going to be an awesome content. I mean, Sean could talk more about his panel that he's going to be hosting, but it's going to be great.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. I'm doing so that it starts on the November 16th, and we're doing basically 4 days of that week, every day at 5 p.m. I'm doing day 2, and my session features a few of my really, really closest friends, honestly, and it's a pretty eclectic group. So I've got Kevin Lieber of Vsauce 2, who you guys probably aware of on YouTube. There's my friend Afua Richardson, who is a comic book artist for DC, Marvel, Image, and then who most recently did all the on-screen artwork for HBO's Lovecraft Country. So she did if you've seen the show, there's sort of a subplot with one of the characters who draws comic books and things, and Afua did all the actual artwork for all of that. She did a bunch of other stuff for the show too, and she did on-screen drawing. So when you see a character draw, it's actually Afua's hands drawing on screen. So that was kind of cool. But and then my buddy Austin Wintry, who is a video game composer, film composer, probably most famously scored Journey, and then also Assassin's Creed, Abzu, Banner Saga, stuff like that. And all these people have been friends of mine for a long time, and we're going to do a really good conversation about basically just about the entrepreneurial aspects of having a creative career, which is always a really tricky thing for people, I think. So I'm super excited about it, and I think just the fact that we're going to have really cool guests should be fun. And like Paul said, it's all free. So if you want to register, find the link in the description, and we'll just sign up and attend. It's that easy. So that's going to be pretty exciting. So the show today, we wanted to talk about Borat. Well, Borat 2, which let me remind this, Borat Subsequent Moviefilm is what he called it. I'm going to preface all of this by saying I absolutely hated Borat 1. It was one of my least favorite things that's ever been put to screen. On the other hand, Paul loved it. And I think, Jen, you hadn't seen it before. Borat.
No, at all. I hadn't seen the first one. I'd seen, bits and pieces, the clips, people quoting it incessantly, memes, all that good stuff. But, and just from that, I could already tell that this was not at all my cup of tea. So I never subjected myself to trying to watch it, but I did watch Subsequent Moviefilm because that's how much I love you. So.
Yeah, well, same, because I would not normally volunteer to watch a Borat movie, but because I hated the film and because you hadn't seen it, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to explain what Borat is, what it's about, and how we ended up with the sequel 14 years later.
Right. So Borat is basically it's a documentary about Sacha Baron Cohen dressing up and just doing stupid stuff. So Borat, the original 2006, which came out when I was still in high school, so it hit right at the right time for me. This was before memes, so we didn't sit around sharing memes. We sat around saying "very nice" to each other. That was just the culture. So it was a big influence on the culture in that time, and it still has a big impact. But so Borat 1, if you haven't seen it, it was basically just laugh at Sacha Baron Cohen. He's a funny guy, and it was a great success, as he would say. And so fast forward 14 years to Borat 2, Subsequent Moviefilm, and it's since it's so famous, it's such a cultural touch point, he couldn't dress up as Borat and walk around. There was a couple scenes in the movie that he kind of looked like Borat, and people caught on very quickly. So it was him just dressing up in fat suits and trying to make a political point, and deliver a girl to Donald Trump. That's the entire to get Kazakhstan back into good graces. So that's the entire plot of the film. Other than that, there's really not. It's just going from gag to gag. But my main feeling from Borat to Subsequent Moviefilm is that Borat 1, it was funny. Borat 2 was absolutely just garbage. And the reason why is that the first one, you just laugh at him. He's just putting people in ridiculous situations, putting himself in a ridiculous situation. And it's funny. Borat 2, he was trying to make a political point, and just like everything else that politics touches, it ruins it. And it was a slog to get through. It was deeply unfunny. And I went back and watched Borat to just try to remind myself. I did. I actually went back and watched it, and it's like, was this actually funny? And it is. It's still funny to me. And the biggest difference is that in Borat 1, the joke was on him. In Borat 2, he's trying to make it on with politics and make a political point and make a joke on people that, I mean, at this point is a lot of people in this country. So it just missed every single time. I think one scene where this is the middle of a pandemic, they're filming. He goes up to this random dude in the middle of nowhere, and he's trying to make fun of him as a Trump supporter, and he brings him into his home during a pandemic. What an evil person.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of like every single time they try to make fun of someone.
So there were obviously some like really expressly political moments in the first Borat. So there's very famously, he, kind of, well, actually, no, now I don't even think I'm thinking about that. I think I'm actually thinking about Bruno in any case. So never mind. I think I even take back. I was going to say the Ron Paul moment, but I think that was Bruno and not Borat.
That was not Borat.
But
so go ahead.
Oh, so what I was going to say though, in any case, is that like Sacha Baron Cohen's overall style of comedy, and this goes back all the way to like the Ali G show and stuff like that, is to be a caricature or a character for himself, and then to put himself in like real life situations, and then basically force everybody else to react to him and to how crazy, whatever crazy thing he's saying. And the thing that really like has always bothered me about this is, first of all, people when you put them on the spot, people do really different things than when they sort of have an actual like understanding of the full scope of the situation, especially when you add elements like cameras, and especially when you add elements like foreigners into the mix. So like one of the things that's really weird about Borat is that you can see this, and you can see this in Borat 2 also, is a whole lot of people, and I think the scene that you're talking about, Paul, is a good example of this. You see a whole lot of people trying to navigate a really tough social situation where a camera is on them and they know they're being filmed, and they're trying to navigate something where they don't want to offend. Like if the person is actually genuine, they want to be respectful of that person and try not to offend whatever it is they believe, even though clearly they're uncomfortable with whatever it is they're saying. I think a good example of this, getting way ahead of things, is an example. They go to an abortion doctor and basically make it seem like they want. Wow, this is really like getting like way ahead of everything, because I have to go back and explain stuff. But they basically make it seem like Borat like got his daughter pregnant, and that they wanted to have an abortion. And now the abortion doctor is trying very hard to navigate a situation where he can clearly tell that people are not from the United States and that they are not from like our culture. And he's trying and also navigate the challenge of having what could be an abusive father in the room with a daughter who seems to be reluctant to tell the truth about the situation, which is probably pretty common in those kinds of situations anyway. Like if it's a abusive situation, like, obviously people don't always tell the truth when the abusive partner is there. So all of those kinds of things are like really, really, really difficult to navigate your way around. And it's being done at the abortion doctor's expense. Like it's something where it's not just like you said at the beginning, like it's not like Sacha Baron Cohen finding ways to show how dumb his character is, but it's all predicated on finding ways to show how dumb the people that he's literally tricking to get these shots are, and that's always bothered me a ton. Like I think that kind of filmmaking is I think it's deeply unethical. I think it's really, really, really disingenuous. And we'll get to this in a minute, I hope, because I really want to talk about it. But like when you combine that with the power of editing, which, certainly I think all three of us, but Paul, you and me especially, like having been on that side of the camera for so long, your power as an editor is immense. And it's very easy to film somebody for even an hour or so and come up with stuff that would make them look bad. And if you recut stuff that they say, which Borat does constantly, and if you reorder things, or if you, cut out really important, qualifying statements and things like that, you can make people look really, really, really bad. And that's typically what Sacha Baron Cohen's comedy is sort of built around. And that's what's always kind of driven me nuts about it, even going back to 2006. But
yeah. And so going back and revisiting the first Borat, the joke is trying to make fun of Americans, but the funny part is that everyone's too polite. And that's what makes it funny. Is that, and this is kind of similar to Borat 2, but I think what is so unfunny about Borat 2 compared to the first one is that it is trying to do the same thing, but take a political angle to it. And it is so obvious and ham-fistedly done. It's it's really actually kind of sad how much where we're at in this point where you take a legitimate cultural icon and just kind of throw it in the trash because Trump bad.
Yeah.
the first one, it's definitely a lot of deceptive editing, but it was always it always kind of felt like it was just kind of trying to make fun of Borat, try to make fun of the character. There's a very famous scene. I mean, the scene where he is in the first one, where he is at a Southern dinner party and he insults everyone to their face, and they're still very polite to him. And finally, after he invites a prostitute to come in, they end the dinner party. It was after he insulted one of the people's wives to her face, after he poops into a bag and brings it down back to the table. All of them take very much care in trying to accept him and be polite, and that's now it's just taking to the conclusion in Borat 2 that Americans are just evil and are look at these funny people that want guns and stuff. It's just like, oof. Just have a little bit of self-awareness, and I think we're seeing a lot of this kind of stuff in the last few years, where politics just, wherever it gets its tentacles into, it just kind of ruins it, and it really is unfortunate. Comedy in general.
Jen, as like a complete newbie to all of this, like, what was your experience like watching this for the first time?
Sitting through this movie was actually physically uncomfortable for me. Like, there was no part of this experience that I enjoyed at all. I could not fathom why people would like voluntarily subject themselves to watching this movie, one, and two, enjoying it, because there were clearly people on the internet who enjoyed this movie, but I could not for the life of me understand why. I could not get my head around what had just happened to me, why it was happening to me as a viewer. Like, I'm not sure I wanted to understand the thought process that went into deciding that this cut of this movie was good. Let's do that one. Ship it, guys. It's great. Yeah. They're gonna love it.
It's funny too, because the Borat 2, I just looked, has like 86% favorable on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's like pretty middling everywhere else. So like IMDb, it's like 6.9. Metacritic is like 68%. Which,
but like, sounds super high to me. Like,
it does sound, it is super high. I think especially on this one. I think for one thing, like, there were very, very, very few moments in Borat 2. Like, so I will agree with Paul that Borat 2 the original Borat has funny moments that I did laugh at and then felt bad about, basically. But Borat 2 has very, very few funny moments. Again, going back to the plot, like, the plot is essentially like, it opens with Borat in prison in Kazakhstan, where he's supposedly from. But I want to get to that too, man, because like, Borat's always made Kazakhstan look really, really bad, and he actually got sued for it on the first movie by the state, by the government of Kazakhstan. But anyway, he's been in prison for the last 16 years or 14 or whatever years, and then he gets one opportunity to sort of be pardoned, because they want to make a gift to Donald Trump so that Donald Trump will become Kazakhstan's ally. And the gift that they want to bring him is originally it is a chimpanzee that's been
his biggest star.
What is it? Yeah, he's
their minister of culture or something like that.
Who's a genius, according to
yes.
But instead, Borat's daughter stows away and actually eats the monkey because, well, the ape. But anyway, so that's a whole thing. But then Borat decides that he will give as a gift the daughter, right? And supposedly she's supposed to be 15 in the movie. She's not. She's in her 20s. Like, the actor is in her 20s. She doesn't look 15 at all. But that's, and actually, like that becomes relevant later, because of course the biggest thing that came out of this, the biggest news story to come out of this, is the Rudy Giuliani bit where supposedly Rudy Giuliani is in a hotel room with the girl, and then they cut it to make it look like he's trying to have sex with a 15-year-old. That fell completely flat to me, because that was something where it was hyped up a lot. Like, I'd read headlines and stuff before I watched the movie, and it was like, oh yeah, Giuliani is this horrible creep, and honestly, Giuliani probably is a horrible creep. I have no idea. I've never been a fan of Rudy Giuliani, but regardless of whether or not I'm a fan of him politically, what actually happened is he was doing an interview with somebody who, like in the context of what he would have known, he was doing an interview with somebody who was inexperienced at interviewing, and he was very, very nice to her, and he tried very hard to make her feel like a better interviewer than she was actually being, which is a pretty magnanimous thing to do as an interview subject, especially a politician who's done that. Of course, he's got an incentive to look as good as possible, so he wants the interview to go well too. But then the scene in question, the supposedly sort of offending scene in question, all Giuliani did was try to unmic himself. And if anybody in the audience has ever actually been on that side of film production, kind of how this works. Like, there are uncomfortable, it's sort of a weird thing where you want to hide the microphone cable. If you have a lavalier microphone, you want it to run under somebody's clothes. And to do that, often you have to have them untuck their pants and, stuff the cable down in there, and, maybe run it under their belt or behind them or whatever. And that's literally all Giuliani was doing. He was untucking his pants so that he could get the microphone out and get the cable out. And he sat down on the bed to do this, probably because he's an old man and it's hard for him to do, some of these things. That was my reading of it anyway. I mean, it seemed very, very clear to me that there was no sort of sexual intent. There was nothing in there that actually fit that description. And it was all just cut around like pretty normal things. Like, if you do a lot of interviews, you've been through this a lot. Like, you know how all of this works, and you get used to it at some point. I mean, it's as a man, having been on this side of the camera for as long as I have, I can tell you guys too, it's sometimes very uncomfortable to do this with women, actually, because there are a lot of times where you have to run a microphone cable, inside a blouse or like through a bra strap or something. And so it's a very delicate, weird situation to be in general. And the way that I typically handle that is by, first asking the person to do it themselves if they can. And then if I have to be involved in any kind of way, being really, really over cautious about like, okay, I'm going to do this. Is this okay? How's this going to be? And even then, it's still really, really uncomfortable most of the time, because a lot of times it's strangers too, So again, going back to what I was saying before, like the whole idea of Borat is putting somebody in these kind of like awkward or uncomfortable situations, filming their reactions, and then recutting those reactions to make it look even worse than the actual situation is, which is like, I don't know. Again, I just find the whole thing to be really unethical, and I find it to be not particularly funny either. I mean, like there's just nothing about that scene like really made me laugh. It just, like I could see from a mile away, I don't know, maybe you guys feel this way, but I could see from a mile away that it, the whole point of going to Giuliani, much the same as going to the CPAC event and everything else, was just to try to find somebody in the Trump administration to look terrible. That was literally the whole point of it. So
yeah, every single set piece, you could tell that, you could tell that they started with, oh, Republicans think this way, so let's put them in a situation where we think they'll be uncomfortable, and then it doesn't happen. So I think a great example of that is that Borat's daughter goes into a Republican women's meeting and talks about a very uncomfortable subject, and this group of women, very nice to her, very polite, and give her a lot of leeway. And
what was that?
Just those women were super nice about that whole situation. I'm not sure I would have been that.
And again, it's a situation where like the daughter Tudor was like saying things that would have been deeply offensive to a lot of those people, or like I think they thought they were going to be deeply offensive to a lot of those people, and they were treating her with charity and pity and kindness, and trying to and sort of feeling like she was naive and like, hey, we can help this young girl,
Mm-hmm.
Like I didn't get anything from that was like, oh, we're, get out, like there's nothing that's like,
right.
Yeah.
And it's just like scene after scene, setup after setup. It's the same thing. It's, oh, the people that think Trump is great act this way. Let's put him in this situation where we're going to get him. And then it's not. Like I said earlier, the guys that have crazy conspiracy theories, which they do, but they bring in someone that is very much unlike them and let them live with them for a few days. It's just how terrible of them. And I think for me, it's just this very weird sentiment that Americans are bad, and we need to show that, when in Borat and now Borat 2, it just shows that Americans are probably too polite, and especially Borat 1, Americans are too polite and deal with and put up with a lot of stuff just because it's this how we are. And it's just hard. It's just really frustrating, because you hear this a lot, like in a lot of different areas, of how terrible America is, how bad, how racist we are, how stupid we are, and just to single out a half of the country because of political views and try to make fun of them, and then have it blow up in your face, and then try to tout it as it's actually funny and a great. It's just hard. It's just hard to swallow. And I think the closest they got to getting what they wanted was the rally with when Borat put on a fat suit and sang a country song about the Wuhan flu. That was actually kind of a funny song. And while they got a lot of good cutaways that they wanted, with one guy carrying the Confederate flag, which is just silly, but just obviously just stupid. But I just don't. That whole scene, it felt like they were using that as a way to say, see, these people are racist, stupid, when the situation is they're at a rally, and this guy in a fat suit, obvious fat suit, gets up and starts singing a silly song, and you laugh.
So that song too, like basically what was really funny. I mean, what was supposed to be funny about it was that he got people to do call and response, and so he got people to like sing along with him, and essentially say, like, name a person, Obama, Fauci, whoever, we should inject them with the Wuhan flu or whatever. And the thing is, like, I think that's obviously sort of meant to make it seem like all those people are really malicious and like they want people to die or whatever. But to your point, Paul, like, it was a very obvious fat suit, a very obvious parody, a very obvious comedy song. It wasn't people, singing like some kind of like German national anthem, like shouting about how they want to murder everybody. It was people laughing at the stupidity and the sort of the satire of it, and then singing along. And getting people to sing along in a live concert setting is super, super easy. Like it is not people want to do that. Like they want to be a part of the stage show. They always want to be a part of the stage show. That's just part of being a good presenter and a good performer. So it's weird because, again, like it's meant to make them all seem like they're terrible, terrible people. I don't think I could get anything from that as far as like whether or not they believe, anything malicious in any way. They were just singing along with a dumb, clearly satirical comedy song at a rally, like which, almost anybody would do at some point. Like there's a limit, and obviously these people are people who are, who find that kind of thing to be particularly funny because it was really well targeted to that specific rally. But like honestly, it was just kind of what you would find at any performance or any rally. Like it's not that weird, and so I don't know, like stuff like that just super frustrating.
Yeah, and it's so I think there could have been a way forward to make this an actual interesting critique on our current situation if there was a little bit of trying to make fun of both sides, which which the original Borat kind of does a good job of. There's a scene with feminists in New York, and he says ridiculous stuff, and they react accordingly. And then there's a scene at a rodeo, which is the complete opposite of these women in New York, and so they kind of make fun of both sides while just making fun of Borat. But this is just, Trump supporters bad. Here we go. And while on both sides, there's ample room to make fun of plenty of people on both sides, because our situation in our current time, there's a lot to make fun of, and you could easily have put Borat into those situations on both sides and actually come out with an interesting critique of our society in 2020.
Yeah, there were plenty of opportunities to make this an interesting movie, a funny movie, just a commentary on life in America in general, but wearing its agenda on its sleeve the way that it did, and then not even getting the results that they were going for. These are actually generally nice people who want to do the right thing and help people. But no, let's absolutely just stick to this and forget everything else.
Well, so I want to talk briefly, and then we'll probably wrap it up here, but I want to talk briefly about some of the lawsuits that Sacha Baron Cohen's fielded for some of these things. The only one so far that I'm aware of for Borat 2 is actually the estate of Judith Dim Evans, who was the Holocaust survivor who was at the synagogue that he attends. So there's a moment in the film where Borat is deeply saddened because he gets told that the Holocaust did not happen, because he is a terribly anti-Semitic character. And so because he now believes that the Holocaust, which was quote unquote his country's like defining achievement, or part of his country's, most crowning achievement, was murdering Jewish people, then he is now sad because his worldview has crumbled, because if it wasn't true, everything he believes is a lie, basically. So he goes to a synagogue, and he dressed as some kind of a like caricature of a Jewish person, long nose and horns and all this like just deeply, deeply offensive stuff. And he sits down and he sort of, uncomfortably talks to a couple of old women who are there. One of whom is this woman, Judith Evans, and she is just the nicest, kindest human being you've ever seen. Like she takes an opportunity. It's something that I it's one of my favorite things about humanity, honestly. And she takes somebody who is, clearly there to make fun of them or insult them, and turns it into an opportunity to find a connection and find a way to show compassion to this horrible racist character. And her estate sued the production because they claim that she was tricked, and she was told that this was going to be a documentary interview about the Holocaust and things like that. She did not know it was going to be a comedy movie. And again, going back to what I've been saying like this whole time, I just feel like taking advantage of people like that. I mean, this is a not 80 whatever, late 80s Holocaust survivor, and you're kind of tricking her into doing this. Now, of course, the lawsuit's already been thrown out, and this is part of what's interesting about all of this to me, is that like all of the lawsuits. So the Kazakhstan's foreign ministry had sued Sacha Baron Cohen basically for defamation, because he makes their country seem like really truly awful. Like I don't know that there's ever been a worse depiction of a country than the way that Borat 1 depicts Kazakhstan, right? And just the fact that he claims to be from Kazakhstan and he's representing Kazakhstan in this whole thing. And and so there was that. There was a suit there's a Romanian town that he shot that was like the hometown. That's like Borat's hometown, was a town in Romania called Glad, which is truly one of the poorest places on the planet. And Borat, all he does is make them look backwards and stupid and everything else. And I just feel like we used to talk about this idea of punching up or punching down with comedy. And there's some aspects of that I think are kind of dumb, but like, I do think there's something to be said for like taking one of the poorest places in the world and turning it into the butt of a joke. It's not awesome. And
No.
And all of these lawsuits get thrown out because he's got release forms for everybody. Everybody who goes on camera, everybody who's in the film has signed an agreement that says that the filmmakers can use the footage however they want, and that's standard. That's really, really standard procedure for any kind of filmmaking. And it's important that it's standard too, because like an editor does need to have the ability to manipulate the footage and cut it and do whatever needs to be done to to tell the best story that they can. But when filmmakers like Borat do it, it makes it harder for people like me. When I produce a documentary, it gets harder and harder, because anytime somebody deceives people and then misrepresents them or makes them look terrible on camera, it makes more and more people skeptical of signing those kinds of agreements. And one of the reasons why one of our final sort of documentary in the How We Thrive series took so long to release, it literally took like an extra 6 months or more, just because I was waiting for somebody to sign a release form, and a lot of that was because she didn't trust that we weren't going to, do terrible things with the footage, and we didn't, of course, but like, it just makes it harder to do those kinds of things.
Yeah, when you undermine people's trust in basic processes, when someone tells you, "Hey, I'm filming a documentary, it's going to be about this. Would you like to participate?" And you say, "Yeah, sure, let me sign the thing." And then you see the final product and you realize that not only have you been misled, you've been flat out lied to. you know,
Yeah.
then, and so public and it's so out there and everybody knows that this has happened. Especially when you get to the level of popularity of something like Borat, you know, and so now it's in the national conversation, be like, oh my goodness, how did these people even, like, why would you even agree to do something like that? And so now fewer and fewer people are agreeing to do something like that, even when the intent is pure and, you know, everybody's actually on the level. But we're not mind readers, man. We can't actually know that they're on the level until we see the final product. And by then it's too late because you've already signed it or you've declined to participate. And so either, you know, people are running this terrible risk of either looking like idiots or not participating in something that could be awesome because of the mistrust that is sown through projects like these. And, you know, obviously I'm never going to be the one to say there ought to be a law. You know, we should stop these people from doing this kind of thing. You know, no, that's not at all what I'm saying. But people need to be aware of the sort of downstream effects that they're having on the state of media in general, not only in the United States, but the whole world, when they decide that they're going to play a joke like this.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that so, and, you know, the idea of making a law to sort of solve these kinds of things, you know, it's the worst possible approach you could take because you're then putting politicians in the power to decide what's art, what's comedy, what's you know, what's even a documentary, right? What's truth at some point becomes the you know, and it's yeah, that is not a slope you even want to approach, let alone slide down. Um, but it is something that like has always really really deeply bothered me about the way that Sacha Baron Cohen does comedy, you know. And I would it's funny because I think there are other kinds of mockumentaries, and there are a lot of mockumentaries where they even some where they involve, you know, real people or unsuspecting people in some of these things. And there's also shows like, I don't know, like Billy Eichner's Billy on the Street and stuff like that, where a ridiculous person like appears out of nowhere and puts somebody on the spot and asks them a question or whatever. But the understanding of the situation is not deceptive, right? If you're walking down the street of New York City and some crazy person comes up on you and says something ridiculous and ask you to respond on camera, like that's not actually a deceptive situation. It's a weird situation. It's a situation you might find yourself a little uncomfortable with, or it's a situation that you might find to be very, very odd. But it's the covenant between the guy asking the question and you still know exactly who that person is. You know that they're being ridiculous. You know that it's probably a comedy bit, or you can infer that pretty quickly. Like it's pretty easy not to be like actually deceived by it or feel sort of taken advantage of in that context. So there are definitely ways. And look, I've seen this in other contexts a lot as well. I mean, journalists, some journalists, and I don't support this at all, but some journalists will lie about who they're working for, who you know, what the story is about that they're working on, in order to get quotes and information that they would not be able to get, you know, without doing that kind of stuff. And they do it because it works. I mean, it absolutely works. If you go and under a false pretense to a meeting and you say, I'd like to do, like, let's say you want to go interview Donald Trump, and you present yourself as being a like ultra conservative, somebody from an ultra conservative group or a group that seems like it's ultra conservative, and you say, I want to interview you on how incredible you've been on the economy and how great you are as a president and everything else. you're more likely to get an interview than if you go saying, I work for, Media Matters, and I hate Donald Trump, and I hate everything you stand for, and I want to grill you about how terrible you are. Like, obviously, you're gonna get better results one way than the other way, but one way remains a deceptive, dishonest approach, and I really hate that as a thing. So, all right, let's do some final thoughts on Borat 2, because we've got a bonus episode to talk about that I am more excited about. So, Jen, final thoughts, Borat.
Okay, so when we did the episode on This Is Spinal Tap, we established that I am not a fan of embarrassment-based comedy.
Yeah.
So even if this was actually funny in places, I still would have hated it, because it's just about embarrassing people, and I'm not about that life. But it even missed that mark. It missed that mark of being funny at all, as far as I'm concerned. And I hated every moment of this movie. There were no redeeming qualities. I was physically uncomfortable like the entire time. Like I had a little bit of the panic just because of the situations that these people were being put in. And then at the end of it, I was instructed to go vote. And
forgot about that. Oh,
yeah.
Man. As if I hadn't been told to vote enough this year.
Like, seriously, just back off, man. Like, you need to just cool out. I'm already registered to vote. I can't register anymore.
Register harder, Jen.
Well, that's what you think.
Right. Yeah. Register a few more times.
Yeah. Well, in fairness, once I move, then I can register to vote again.
It's true.
But until then, I'm as registered as I can be. So yeah, hated it. Full stop. Do not recommend.
Strong. So this for me, the Borat, like I said, was one of my, one of those movies that just hit at the right time, right age. This was one of the most unfunny movies I have ever seen. This kind of reminds me of now I'm blanking on the name, but the spoof of 300, Meet the Spartans, I believe, or something like that.
Spartans, yeah.
It is on that level of just how unfunny it is, and it's kind of sad. I think this Sacha Baron Cohen was going for a commentary on Trump supporters, but I think it ended up being more of a commentary on himself and people that just can't take politics out of things and live their life. Because trying to set up these caricatures outside that he's trying to make fun of, and then just like we've detailed earlier, it's just not proving the point. Humans are deeply complicated and interesting, and you just can't boil people down into, well, you vote for this guy, so you have to be like this. And yep. I think that for me, it's a good thing that we can't do that. And it's something that I deeply believe that every individual is very different and has individual reasonings for believing the way they believe. And you can't stereotype people. And then, so I just thinking that you can stereotype someone because they believe they like someone, politics is just wrong. And this goes to show that very clearly. And so no, I would not recommend this movie, which is just very sad to me. It is, it could have been, like I said earlier, it could have been an interesting commentary on our situation as a society. But it just went down the predictable hole of Trump bad. If you support him, you're bad too mantra. So, yeah, I'm glad I watched it, though I would not ever watch it again, and it would not suggest someone else doing it. Yeah. So I am excited, though, for what we are talking about next for the for the Patreon bonus.
So
I know Jen doesn't like it, but I love it.
I haven't talked to Jen about this yet. All right. So that is definitely all we have time for to talk about Borat. We'll probably never talk about it again, and that's fine with me. But thank you guys for watching the show or listening wherever you guys are consuming this podcast. We really appreciate it. If you want to support the show and if you want to support Out of Frame, please check out patreon.com/outoframeshow. It's right here on the screen. For patrons, and if you are a patron, the show doesn't end here. We are going to stick around and have a little bit of a bonus section on a Sacha Baron Cohen-ish movie that I actually do like called Talladega Nights. So for everybody else, thank you. This is the end of the show. But for patrons, stick around and we'll see you in a little bit. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.